What's the one piece of career advice you wish someone had given you when you were starting out?
So my career started out as an apprentice getting into software engineering. So I didn't go through maybe the more usual route of going to university and those kinds of tracks. So I stopped college when I was 17 years old and started that apprenticeship route. And the thing that I think I wish that someone had told me when I was younger would be not to worry too much about the languages that you're writing software in. And there's definitely a perception of languages that are on trend or maybe perceived to be sort of the latest and upcoming. And often actually when you're starting out, you're maybe working on some stuff that's pretty well adopted. It's not sort of too bleeding edge. And for me, that was .NET. I did a lot of work with it in my early days. And actually that was really formative to help me understand things like good software hygiene, which I think is actually much more important, much more transferable than necessarily being an absolute specialist in one language. Knowing about good software hygiene allowed me to do things like good testing strategies and approaches, and it also really brought into focus the aim to build stuff simply as well. It's actually really, really easy, particularly when you're starting out, to make stuff really, really complicated. And I've absolutely got my scars for doing that. But as an industry, often we're writing software for another developer who's going to take it on and work on it in the future. Now, you sort of have to sometimes just think about what would it be like for you to receive maybe your own work back without any kind of additional context, sort of trying to operate on that software. So if you have that kind of mindset and you're trying to aim for the simple, not only would it actually help you become a better engineer, and that's regardless of whatever language you're using, but it's probably a good thing for the industry as well. It makes better, safer software in all aspects.
I think it's a good mindset to have, like you say, to think about it as though you're going to get it back. You want to comment on there and make sure it's clean and somebody else can read it, and you're not creating problems for someone further down the line.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a bit like mathematics, I guess, and I'm not a mathematician at all, but from the brief sort of pop culture kind of understanding I have of mathematics, it's the simple formulas are the ones that get picked up and the ones that are used, and it's similar in software. It's almost like literature. If you consider it so reading as a book, there are some analogies there that you can use. You could use things like spacing and indentation, how your methods are structured, and so on. Which all these things are, they're conducive to testing and other activities as well, which are normally all positive attributes of good software engineering. Actually learning those skills first as like your baseline, that's the thing that sets you apart from someone who's just cobbling code together to make something work versus like good engineering.
Can you share a pivotal moment in your career journey which made a significant impact?
So I think I've been doing this job now for 12, 13 years in some form of capacity. So I've, from going from apprentice engineer all the way up to my role at Zühlke today as a lead consultant. I've actually had quite a few pivotal moments in my career during that time. So I'll try and think of maybe my most pivotal, but I might mention a couple of others as well. So actually, my most pivotal moment in my career is probably when I just started, and sort of maybe counterintuitively. I, as an apprentice, joined an organisation which was, at the time, a very small group of people. It was a one-man band of sort of maybe a couple of contractors working to deliver software. I was working with a man called Polden, who now runs a company called Carbon 6 Digital, and before that was known as Zühlke. And Paul, he took on an apprentice, which I think is quite a crazy thing to do. I mean, particularly if you're trying to sort of start out, you're getting essentially, I was a 17-year-old, a kid, trying to sort of learn software and get into that world. And he was such an excellent mentor to me. He managed to sort of take me on with sort of no engineering skills really at all, other than sort of the apprentice boot camp that I had. That's like sort of 6 to 8 weeks, so really early stuff. and also trying to explain to me the world of delivery in a software context as well. So being in a very sort of small environment, actually I got to wear many hats within that organization. You know, I was exposed to loads of stuff that probably lots of people necessarily wouldn't have been exposed to. So I got a really good sense of perspective around how to write software, how does that work within sort of a delivery context where you've got a fixed budget, sort of understanding early on these concepts of good enough, and also making all those kinds of mistakes that you do when you start out, and, you know, sort of amplified by being relatively a young person as well. So finding that mentor to help you navigate those activities, I think is unbelievably important in that sense. Moving on sort of from a very formative and Genesis kind of angle, and sort of maybe more to a more mature career sort of moments, it's probably some meetups that I started attending when I was sort of in my early 20s, a couple of years in. So I sort of started going into the wider community, and that was really afforded by a job change later on when I was working in London. So all of a sudden I was much more available to go and to attend meetups and so on. And so I went to the London .NET user group, which was really, really helpful. It gave me lots of breadth of opinion outside my normal sphere. And actually, the thing about the .NET user group is actually quite a lot of the topics weren't really about .NET. It was about those topics I mentioned earlier. It's those good engineering practices, how to write good tests, what does good refactoring look like, rather than sort of buzzwords that then we get thrown around. And you either have to sort of read a book or sort of read something online, and you don't really know if you're getting sort of good advice or maybe how to digest that kind of advice. So that was really, really important for me. And then lastly, my most pivotal moment in recent times is joining a consultancy for sure. So I've been doing consultancy work for about sort of 6 to 7 years, and you are exposed to a whole variety of domains and tech all over the place. And often those sort of scenarios can be quite compressed and quite challenging as well, but you're often working with people who are absolutely brilliant. They're absolutely acing their game, and it is such a privilege sometimes going onto a project and you have an expert joining your team, and you can just watch what they do and you can just learn. And then, you know, just being entirely honest, what I would do is sort of, you know, look at their opinions, look how they write software. I'm going to do that essentially. I'm going to basically sort of copy that. I'm going to emulate that, put it as part of my own internal sort of repertoire, and then use that to develop my skills. So a lot of this stuff is about involving other people. I think there is no getting away from the fact that you have to interact with others to be able to develop yourself. It is not a, you know, as maybe is portrayed in films, you know, sort of hoodie up in a cupboard, sort of in a dark room. You know, you won't grow like that, not effectively anyway. So people are really important to sort of make accelerating and launching your careers.
How do you approach challenges and setbacks in your professional life, and what's your go-to strategy to overcome them?
Challenges are something that's often come up in software engineering in general, even more so in consultancy, because you're dealing with, you know, sort of complexity all the time. And I think, and this is going to sound a little bit cliche, but a challenge is kind of what you make of it and how you let it impact you. So I always sort of see software engineering as basically failing, but mostly all the time, particularly if you're following any kind of test-driven approach anyway. I mean, the whole mantra is write failing tests, fail, write some code, see if it works, no, try again, make it fix. So the job is essentially failing, and then you get it right once, and then you move on to the next thing. You have to be, I think, pretty accepting of failure. And just so when you're in those kinds of moments where maybe the failure is a bit more significant, maybe some bad news, maybe something hasn't gone right on project, and maybe actually it is, you know, sort of your fault, and that can be at that time quite a crushing feeling. But it will happen. It absolutely will happen. You know, people will make mistakes. We're only human beings, you know. And there's two angles you can look at this. So when it's you. I think you just have to sort of take a moment, just let the moment happen, you know, challenge if you need to, but crucially understand what has happened, because what you want to do then is take the experience, and for me at least, I will go and speak to someone trusted to get some perspective. Now that could be just a colleague at work, you know, someone who I've got a sort of close relationship with, and I can say, look, you know, I've screwed this up. I need some advice. What do I do? You know, tell me, how bad do you think this is? Am I just making a big deal about this, and actually maybe it's fine? You know, those kind of things are really important to help contextualize. You know, and I always think as well that you have so many problems sort of throughout your career, which you draw on from experience. So the reason why I can have this kind of conversation with you today is because I know things that haven't worked and things that have worked. Yeah. you have to also recognize that this will eventually just form part of the narrative of why, you know, you're hopefully someone who is more experienced and more refined in the future. So, you know, it sucks at the time. It's just about sort of being calm about it, accepting that, you know, this is probably not going to be the thing that is really earth-shattering as it seems right now. Give it a couple of weeks, and you will probably look back at it as a learning experience. And then what that means is then when you become more of a leader within your organization, and this is something that's more applicable to me in recent years, is when you observe these mistakes happen, you know, you have to sort of empathize. I think empathy is such an important characteristic if you are doing any kind of leadership anyway. You have to empathize and support that person. You need to explain to them, you know, what they've done wrong. You know, you need to be candid about it. You need to sort of tell them the problem, but you don't have to crush them. You know, you don't have to sort of, you know, get at them emotionally or make them feel bad. Let them know what the mistake is. Maybe offer them a bit of a path to sort of, you know, move forward and develop further. You know, you can be that person that either maybe you had or maybe you didn't have, and you sort of had to deal with it yourself. And that can be something that is, you know, is really nice to, you know, to see it as a complete package as you develop yourself.
And rewarding when you see them overcoming their failures too.
Absolutely. It doesn't matter how experienced you are, you will make a mistake. So I think it's almost, you know, again, going back to maybe some more cliche kind of stuff. It's like, so treat others how you would like to be treated yourself, you know, just that kind of stuff. You know, sometimes these cliches, they resonate and they live because they actually have great impact and meaning and are very applicable. I've worked with some people who, when I've made a mistake, haven't been kind or sympathetic, and it's a horrible feeling. It's a horrible feeling.
Yeah.
It will happen with people, but you just have to, as a person yourself, you just sort of have to take it on the chin a little bit, and you know, if it is overwhelming, you know, talk to people. No success or experiences I don't think is really achieved in isolation. It's about reaching out to those trusted friends and colleagues for support.